The Bible is full of demons, and it never once says where they came from. Count the verses yourself. Unclean spirits enter people, speak from their mouths, beg, bargain, and scream, and from Genesis to Revelation no verse ever stops to explain what they are. But the books the Bible's first readers read alongside it do explain, and their answer is worse than anything the silence let you imagine. A demon is a ghost. The ghost of a giant that died before the flood, still walking the earth because it has nowhere else to go. The same books say that 9 out of every 10 of them are already locked away, and that the ones still loose are loose because heaven agreed to it. And when the demons of the Gospels open their mouths, they talk exactly like creatures who know that arrangement, begging to stay out of a certain prison, asking whether the torment has come early. This is the story the Bible never tells about the things the Bible cannot stop mentioning. It starts at the loose thread we have pulled on this channel before, and if you have walked this road with us, walk it once more slowly, because this time it ends somewhere new. Genesis chapter 6. Just before the flood, the sons of God look on the daughters of men, take wives from among them, and father children on them. The children are the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old. 4 verses, and the Bible moves on to Noah, and the giants are never explained. That silence bothered the ancient world far more than it bothers the modern one. Because the ancient world had a book that filled the silence. The Book of Enoch, written around 300 years before Christ, read by the communities that hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted word for word in the New Testament's letter of Jude, and Holy Scripture to this day in the Ethiopian Church, though almost no other Bible on earth kept it. Enoch tells the story, Genesis would not. 200 angels of a heavenly order called the Watchers descended on the summit of Mount Hermon, swore a single binding oath, and took human wives. Their leader was an angel named Shemi-Hazah. The wives bore sons, and the sons were giants, and the giants ate the world. The crops first, then mankind, then every living thing, and at the last one another. And the earth, the book says, brought accusation against them. The ground itself carried the complaint upward, past the heaven the Watchers had abandoned. Heaven's response was not a flood. Not at first. The book says God dispatched 4 angels with 4 separate warrants. One went to a man named Noah to warn him. One seized the Watcher who had taught mankind the making of weapons, bound him hand and foot, and buried him alive in a hole in the desert, a pit we have stood at the edge of in another video. One was sent to the giants themselves, and his orders are the coldest sentence in the book. Set them against one another, that they may destroy each other in battle. And the last angel bound Shemi-Hazah and the rest of the 200, but not before they were made to watch. The fathers who could not die stood witness while the sons who could slaughtered one another. Only after the watching were they dragged beneath the hills of the earth, chained in darkness for 70 generations, until the judgment. The giants went down by the sword, by their own brothers' hands. The water only came after, to scour what was left. And that should have been the end of the giants. It is where their story stops in every children's telling. Monsters before the flood, gone with the flood. But the Book of Enoch does not stop there. It follows the giants past the moment their bodies hit the ground. And what it finds is the reason this episode exists. Because the giants, Enoch says, could only half die. Think about what they were. Their fathers were spirits of heaven, beings that do not die at all. Their mothers were flesh of earth. A giant was both natures fused into one body, a thing heaven's own order had no category for. So when the body was cut down, only the half that came from the mothers died. The half that came from the Watchers could not. Enoch's God explains it in a speech delivered from his own throne, and the speech reads like an autopsy of a demon. The giants, born of spirit and of flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits, the book says, have proceeded out of their bodies. The flesh went down in blood. Something walked away from the corpse. And heaven assigned that something an address. Spirits of heaven, the speech goes on, belong in heaven, but the spirits begotten on the earth. On the earth shall be their dwelling. The ghosts of the giants are not banished to the earth. They are native to it. This is their home by birth, the only one they will ever have. When the books of this tradition talk about demons being cast out, there is nowhere to cast them but sideways. Then the speech turns to what the ghosts of the giants do, and it reads like a field report on every haunting and every affliction mankind has ever recorded. They afflict, oppress, destroy, and attack. They take no food, yet they hunger and they thirst. Sit with that clause. These are spirits that remember eating, creatures that were once the hungriest things that ever walked, that consumed the world down to the bone, now unable to eat forever, and still hungry. Scholars who spend their lives in this literature say that is the engine of everything a demon does in these books. It is a spirit that remembers having a body, it remembers hands, it remembers a mouth, and it wants back in. And whom do they attack? Enoch's answer is the most intimate horror in the whole tradition. The spirits of the giants rise against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them, because they came out of them. Half of every giant was human. The mothers of the monsters were the daughters of men. The ghosts of the giants haunt mankind because mankind is the family that bore them. Every demon, in this book's accounting, is a relative, the orphan dead of the oldest and worst marriage in creation, come back to the only bloodline it has left. There is one more clause in the speech, and it is the one that should keep you up tonight. From the day of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, the book says, "The spirits that went out of their flesh shall destroy without incurring judgment. Thus shall they destroy until the day of the consummation, the great judgment." Read that again. Without incurring judgment. Until the end of the age, the ghosts of the giants operate under a suspended sentence. The haunting of the human race is not a crime heaven has failed to notice. It is a crime heaven has scheduled. So the flood recedes, the world begins again, and mankind is not alone in it. Hold that picture, because the next book makes it a matter of policy. The Book of Jubilees, another text. The Dead Sea communities copied more often than most books of the Bible, and another book the Ethiopian church still binds as scripture, picks up the story a few generations after the flood. Noah's grandchildren are being attacked. Unclean demons, the book says, are leading them astray, blinding them and killing them. And Noah, the old man who survived the end of the world, does something no one in Genesis ever does about demons. He prays about them. His prayer identifies them precisely. These are the spirits of the sons of the Watchers, the very ghosts Enoch described. Shut them up, he asks. Hold them fast in the place of condemnation. Let them not rule over the spirits of the living. And God grants it. The order goes out, bind all of them, every ghost of every giant chained. For one sentence of Jubilees, the earth is about to be swept clean. Then a voice objects. The book names him Mastema, the chief of the spirits, the officer over the ghosts of the giants, a name we have met before on this channel, and if you have seen that video you already know he does not lose arguments. Lord, Creator, he says, let some of them remain before me, for if none are left me, I cannot execute the power of my will upon the sons of men. It is a staffing request, and heaven rules on it like a court. Let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. 90% of the demons in the world bound that day, 1 in 10 left operational by ruling. According to this book, every unclean spirit that has troubled mankind since, every demon in every deliverance, every dark thing in every sick room, belongs to a 10% remnant that exists because its commander asked for it, and heaven said yes. It simply adds a mercy at the end. Angels taught Noah the medicines and the herbs that answer the spirit's attacks, and Noah wrote them in a book and gave the book to his son. Mankind was not left disarmed, but mankind was left hunted, lawfully hunted, until the end. If all of this sounds like theology from nowhere, one strange book courting another, then come stand in the caves. The same desert library that preserved the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Jubilees, and the Book of Giants we opened in the last episode also preserved the songs its people sang in the dark. Scholars call them the Songs of the Sage. They are incantations, hymns of protection written out by a community that took everything you have just heard as fact, and the opening of one of them states its purpose in plain Hebrew, to frighten and to terrify all the spirits of the destroying angels, the spirits of the bastards, the demons, Lilith, the howlers, and the desert dwellers. Lilith you may recognize. A night demoness the ancient Near East already feared, and this scroll is one of the earliest places her name survives. But listen to the first title on the list, The spirits of the bastards. Scholars read that as the giants' ghosts, filed under their legal name, the offspring of a union that should never have produced children, the mixed blood dead of Mount Hermon. And besides such songs, the community kept the psalm you were taught as a comfort. The 91st, the terror by night, the pestilence that stalks in darkness, copied in a scroll alongside exorcism psalms. 2,000 years ago, by the Dead Sea, real people lay down at night believing the giants' hungry dead were outside, and they sang these very lines at them. Now walk forward a lifetime or two into Galilee and read the most famous demon stories in the world with all of that in your ear. Because here's what almost no one notices about the Gospels. Demons are everywhere in them, and they are never explained. No origin, no definition. The crowds already know what an unclean spirit is. The writers never once stopped to tell you. The books you have just heard are the missing first act. An explanation any reader of those books could supply for himself. And once you have it, the details in the gospel scenes stop being details. An unclean spirit, Jesus says, when it goes out of a man, walks through waterless places, seeking rest, and finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house. Hold that phrase, waterless places. Here is a homeless spirit, restless, hungry for a body it calls a house, wandering, of all things, the dry country. If you carry Enoch's story, you already know what water once did to that spirit's world. Then the line lands like a memory. Then there is the man among the tombs, in the country of the Gerasenes, the one so filled that when Jesus demands a name, the answer comes back, My name is Legion, for we are many, and the many begin to beg. Luke records exactly what they begged for, that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. The abyss is the deep prison of this whole literature, the place of condemnation where 9 parts of their kind already sit in chains, where the watchers their fathers lie bound beneath the hills, the one address every spirit in these books knows and dreads above all things. They beg instead for pigs. Any body, any house, anything but the pit, and he permits it, and some 2,000 swine stampede down the bank into the sea and drown. The spirits fled the abyss, and their new bodies carried them straight into the water. Whatever you make of that ending, one thing is textual. In Matthew's telling of that same encounter, the demons open with a question. Have you come here to torment us before the time? Before the time. They are creatures on a schedule, destroying without judgment until the day of judgment, and they know their own case law. The first Christians said the quiet part in public. Justin Martyr, writing an open letter to the rulers of Rome a little over a century after the crucifixion, explains where demons come from. The angels transgressed, took women, and produced children, and these, he writes, are the so-called demons. A generation later, the philosopher Athenagoras says it even more precisely. In one clause, the souls of the giants are the demons which wander about the world. For roughly 3 centuries, that was a mainstream Christian answer, repeated by teacher after teacher in apologies addressed to emperors. This was not a whisper at the edge of the faith. It was the standard answer. And then the church changed its mind. By the 400s, its greatest authorities had rejected the whole story. The sons of God in Genesis were reread as ordinary human men, not angels at all. The Book of Enoch fell out of copying in the West, and demons were reclassified as fallen angels and nothing else. The older answer, the ghosts, the hunger, the 10%, the schedule, did not survive the revision. Except in Ethiopia, where Enoch and Jubilees never left the canon. And except in a desert library no one would open for another 1,500 years, where the songs against the spirits of the bastards lay in the dark of a cave, waiting to tell us what the Bible's first readers actually believed was in the dark. So the next time you read a gospel page where something ancient begs and bargains and asks about the time, you now hold the file its first readers held. Nothing in the room with Jesus is explained, because nothing in the room needed explaining. A demon was a known thing. The hungry half-dead child of heaven and earth, native to this soil, barred from every other, destroying under a license that expires at the end of the age, and it knew the schedule better than the men watching the exorcism. One door in this story we have deliberately left shut. The giants had fathers, and the fathers are in chains. The giants themselves are dead, and you have now met their ghosts. But the giants also had mothers. The human women of Mount Hermon, the wives of the 200, and about them the Greek text of Enoch records a single line that may be the strangest sentence in this entire literature. The wives of the transgressing angels, it says, shall become sirens, wailing things of the waste places. What that means and what became of them is its own story, and it does not end at the flood.